I'm tired of being a DM, but I still want to keep running games. Let's talk about that. So, the first thing I want to address here is what is DMing? What is being a dungeon master? I think that unfortunately that word has lost some of its meaning and it's gained new meanings. And also, very importantly, is the fact that if you ask different people, you're going to get different answers. Some of the implications I see about being a DM basically boils down to having to do the overwhelming majority of the work both out of session and in session to ensure that the game is fun for everyone. Some of the implications I see about being a DM involve the DM having to go out of their way to make the game enjoyable, and unfortunately I feel like that takes away from what a DM should be doing. The implications of what a DM is or isn't, or what they're expected to do, is obviously going to differ person to person, but I think overall we can all agree that the DM has a large part to play at the table. And I know people are going to make the argument of, oh, everyone at the table puts in equal effort, but I know that not to be true a lot of the time. I have ran me a lot of games where the players put in a minimal amount of effort and I had to put in a lot more effort. However, I think the biggest implication of all of being a DM is being an arbiter of the rules, i.e., you need to know the rules. Now, D&D is a strange game because depending on the table that you sit at, you're either going to be dealing with a lot more rules or you're going to be dealing with a lot more rulings. And the pressure of being a DM having to focus on either rules or rulings is always going to come down to, of course, you, the DM. Which of those hard-coded rules are you going to keep? Which ones are you going to throw away? Which ones are you going to add? And also, very importantly, on the ruling side of things, how are you going to keep that in check? What rulings become hard-coded rules? What rulings are you going to say that's fine in the moment but not permanent? What rulings are you going to say to your players that they're going to keep track of? You know, there's a lot of things to consider with these rules of rulings, and of course you as the DM are the arbiter of said rules, and it's your table, your rules. It's a very important thing. You know, you've got a lot to manage. So why I said I'm tired of being a DM but I still want to run games, how does that work? That seems contradictory. Well, not for me, because I'm tired of being a DM and instead I want to lean more into being a referee. I see being a referee as simply placing down a scenario and ruling things as they stand in the way my players interact with the world. Instead of having to contrive a whole bunch of scenarios that are tailor perfect for my players, instead I want to rate more generic. That sounds like a negative term, but I'm going to say generic. I want to place more generic adventures for my players to interact with, and I want the emphasis on the adventure to come from them in the importance that they place in those adventures at hand. Instead of being a DM that focuses so heavy and hard on the rules and the rulings and crafting these tailor-perfect scenarios for my players, I want to be a referee that simply runs the kind of game I want to run and attracts the kind of players that want to play in those games. There's also another implication I glossed over when it comes to being a DM, and I think that we can mostly say in the zeitgeist of D&D that as a DM you're on the player side, whereas I think with a referee you don't necessarily need to be on the player side. In fact, you can simply not take any sides. You take the rule sides. You place down a scenario, your players engage in that scenario in a certain way, and they lose. Well, tough on them. You are arbitrating the rules perfectly fair as a referee, not on their side, and also very importantly, not against them either. That's the important part. As a referee, I rule the game as is. If my players are smart and have good dice rolls, then guess what? They're going to come out on top. If they are dumb and have bad dice rolls, then I as a referee am going to arbitrate that they are going to lose. Simple as that. Now, why am I tired of DMing? Well, let me tell you what. I've ran, at this point, hundreds, in fact, I have ran over 1,000 sessions of 5e. I've ran a lot of games. And mind you, that's just including 5e. I've ran a whole bunch of sessions of other game systems. Why I'm tired of being a DM is I want my players to take more emphasis. I want my players to take the bull by the horns, and I want to ensure that my players feel as if they themselves are striving and pushing forward in their games, in their stories, in their worlds, instead of me forcing them to go further in their stories, in their adventures, in their worlds. I've walked away from a bunch of games now where I thought to myself, you know, as a DM, I've pushed this story on them, and it was cool at the time, but maybe it would have been better if instead of them simply having a story handed to them, they instead sought out the story. I've thought to myself, you know what? Instead of giving my players a beat that they have to drum to, I simply lay out the drums and they can play their own beat. So that's why as a referee, I want to place down adventures that are a bit more sandbox in nature. I want to place down worlds that are a bit more amenable to how my players interact with them versus giving them more lenient and more cohesive stories that are work super duper hard on. And I want my players to truly work toward the adventure that they want to adventure on. And that's why as a referee, my play style of running the games will shine far greater than being a dungeon master. There's also the funny implication of being a dungeon master is that dungeon master is tied to Dungeons and Dragons. Something very important is I'm running more systems than Dungeons and Dragons. I'm running systems all over the place, and if you actually look at some of the other game systems, they all have different names. Rollmaster, GM, Judge, Warden. You know, there's a bunch of different names for all these things, and instead of having to show up to every different table and be like, oh, this time I'm a warden, oh, this time I'm a judge, I can just say I'm a referee for these games, right? And you know, over the course of those thousands of different sessions that have ran for, at this point, over hundreds of people, I have slowly evolved as a runner of the games, right? In the beginning, I sucked horribly, and now after hundreds, after thousands of sessions, I suck just a little bit less. But that's another aspect of running games is because I've ran for so many different people, I've had people walk away saying that I'm an awesome runner of the games, a game master, a dungeon master, referee, whatever. And unfortunately, I've had people walk away saying that I suck. But that's just the nature of all these games is you can run a game a certain way, you're going to attract a certain kind of people, and unfortunately you're going to detract a certain kind of people. Is what it is. But that's the part of being more of a referee that I'm looking forward to going forward is I'm going to stake my flag in the ground and say, hey, this is the kind of game that I'm running right here, right now. Who wants to join up? Instead of trying to get players and then try to make a game that's perfect for them, I'm going to make a game that's perfect for me. And if anyone else wants to join me on that adventure, so be it. And hey, if nobody shows up, then I guess I get to play some solo D&D, I guess. And speaking of solo D&D, I've been dabbling a bit more into that, and I'm really loving it. It allows me to see the game in a different light because I am predominantly a referee. I'm predominantly a DM. I typically don't like being a player as much as running the games, but being a solo gamer has its own unique perks. But I'll be talking about that in another video. So go ahead and tell me, how do you feel about being a dungeon master, about the implications of a dungeon master? What does a dungeon master mean to you? Do you see any sort of arbitrary ideas on what it is to be a dungeon master? Do you think a DM and a referee are the same thing? Or do you like to separate them? Do you love running games just as much as me? Maybe you're not even a DM or a referee at all. Maybe you're a player and you've thought about dabbling, or maybe you've been steered away from being a DM because you like being a player so much. Go ahead and tell me those things because I would love to hear it, but that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my wonderful patrons and all the subscribers and all the viewers and everybody that supports this channel. Thank you so very much. But that's going to do it for me. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Wow, it has been over a year since I published a video. I had a whole bunch of things going on in my life, but I am here to pump out the content once again, working on videos, working on a whole bunch of written projects, I'm looking forward to hopping back in the content creation bandwagon. Can't wait to see you all for that.